Ron slowly awoke in the large hospital bed where he saw Kim, her mother, and possible Wade Rufus standing near him. He was in a blue hospital gown and had a bunch of large bandages wrapped around his chest. Ron also looked around and noticed that he was back in the United States, inside Middleton Hospital. "Anne, he's awake," Wade informed Kim's mother in the unusual tone that Ron assumed to be fear. "You sure he won't lose control like back there in Japan?" Anne asked to Wade in a worried tone. "I think he's good for now. But we'll need to watch him carefully," Wade replied. "I shouldn't have let him go," Kim said in a remorseful tone. "If I had known this would happen." "Kim, what's going on? What happened?" Ron suddenly asked in a weak voice. "You went berserk and nearly shot down my fighter back in Japan with red bolts of lightning jets of fire you shot from your hands," Wade replied. "I had to knock you out with my fighter's disruptor cannons to stop you." Ron took a moment to process everything Wade had just said. Then he remembered the zombified corpses coming out of the burned houses in an attempt to attack him. Ron remembered tapping into the evil source of energy and wiping out the hordes of zombies with red lightning fire. He also remembered that enormous flying zombified monster trying to vaporize him with beams of red energy and had shot in its snout. At no point during that time did Ron remember Wade being there. "Well, what are you talking about? Those burned zombies attacked me and Rufus, and there was massive flying monsters that shot me in the chest with large beams of energy from its mouth," Ron said frantically in disbelief. "How did you fight them off? Zombies? Wade, what the hell is he talking about?" Kim asked in shock. "I'm telling the truth," Ron insisted. "I was walking through the burnt-up town or remains of Yamadochi when these burnt corpses suddenly came out from the burned houses and tried to eat me and Rufus. Then a mass flying beast came and nearly killed us." "Ron, there wasn't," Wade began. "I'm not crazy!" Ron suddenly yelled. "I almost died!" "Ron!" Wade yelled back. "Ron, let him explain," Kim pleaded. After seeing how worried Kim looked, Ron had calmed down and allowed Wade to speak. "What is it?" he asked calmly. "Ron, there were no zombies or any sort of flying monsters," Wade began. "I tried calling you on the communicator several times, but when you didn't respond, I decided to head over to the last area I dropped you off at. Once I got there, I saw flashes of red light in the distance and headed over there to see what it was. And that's where I found you blasting random piles of rubble and houses with jets of red lightning fire from your hands. What's worse is that there was a sinister glow red around your entire body, and your eyes were bright red and rubble with houses. But of course, when I approached the area, you suddenly went crazy and started attacking me. I tried trying to tell you to stand down with your suit's radio, but you wouldn't listen. You just continued to attack me, and at that point, you hit my ship with one of your red lightning bolts, and I realized there would be no talking you down, so I had to use my ship's weapons to stun you." Ron looked at Wade with a complete disbelief and confusion. He had no idea how to explain something like this, but it was clear that Wade was implying that the zombies and the flying beast had all been an illusion. Ron didn't understand what was going on at this point, but then he remembered the strange voice in his head telling him how weak he was, and also remembered it referring to the evil power as in the red rage. Ron wondered if it had to do something with that. "The red rage," Ron said softly. "That's what it is." "Red rage? What are you talking about?" Kim asked worriedly. "Kim," Ron began, looking over at her with fear in his eyes, "when I entered Japan, I started hearing his weird voice in my head talking to me. It was mocking me and saying all sorts of horrible things to me, like calling me weak, foolish, and a failure. It happened almost the whole time I was there, and that's when I got to the burned town." Ron paused, remembering all the horrors he had seen in the place. The burned houses, the burned down store, and even the burned man crawling out of the burned building, calling for his mother. That was the one thing that pushed Ron over the edge and drove him to the brink of near madness. It caused him to tap into what is now dubbed as the red rage. However, there was one last detail Ron had almost forgotten until now. Right before the zombies showed up, Ron felt a wave of dizziness wash over him for a few seconds. Then the horror began. "Ron, what is it? What happened?" Kim asked in a nervous voice. I I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. When the zombie showed up, Ron replied, beginning to grow more nervous. That's when Ron didn't even finish what he was saying and began to realize something much more darker must have worked when he nearly lost his mind. Wade, Kim, and Ann, and even Rufus had seemed to have similar ideas. You tapped into that evil power, Kim finished with a grim voice. Ron simply nodded without responding. I don't think it's any mystery as to what happened, Wade began with a grim voice. It's only a fury. But from what you described to me, I have no doubt that the Red Rage did something to cause your mind to cause you to see things that weren't really there. Kim, what's this Red Rage you both keep talking and mentioning? Anne asked in concern. We're still not fully sure, but all we know is that evil version of this mystical monkey powers they unwillingly and unintentionally tapped into 5 days ago, when we were fighting a mecha-suited crook in the abandoned train yard in Lowerton, Kim replied. 5 days? What do you mean by 5 days? Ron asked in confusion. Yeah, I forgot to tell you that you've been out for 5 days, Wade explained, and you're really lucky I found you when I did, because that radiation suit had several breaches from all over that lightning and fire you were shooting out all over the place. Once I knocked you out with my ship's disruptor cannons, I had to strip you down to nothing to scrub you down real good, and I had to do the same for Rufus. When I rushed you down to the hospital right after you treated for your injuries, my disruptor weapons were sure did a number on you. But thankfully they didn't hurt you in a very bad way, since I have set them on heavy stun rather than lethal force. Ron slightly parted his gown and saw several large bandages wrapped around his chest. He gently placed his fingers on them and felt a stinging, sharp sensation upon touching the bandages, making Ron cringe painfully. Careful there, Ron. Those wounds are going to take time to heal, Anne warned him. Ron wasn't paying any attention as he then placed his whole hand on his chest, feeling tons of stinging pain rush through him. His mind was on everything that he had seen and experienced in Japan, and all that despair and sorrow suddenly returned upon thinking of Yori. She still lingers in your mind as your sorrowful emotions sink yet again. You feel all the pain you've seen and experienced your useless attempts at finding your friend. Ron suddenly grabbed his head, feeling that horrible feeling return. He knew it was there. The Red Rage was toying with his mind again. No, not again, Ron hissed under his voice. Shut up! You dare deny the truth? You dare deny the Red Rage? You've already tasted its power, so why hold back now? Ron, what is it? What's going on? Anne asked in concern. Mom, what's wrong with him? Kim asked worriedly. Ron? Rufus squeaked, backing away from the front of the hospital bed. Kim, Ron stammered. It's happening. Again, it's in my head. Stop fighting your destiny and give in to the Red Rage. You're weak, and you know it. No, Kim exclaimed, upon her realizing what Ron meant. Don't let it out, Ron. Fight it. Shit, not again, Wade exclaimed in fear, backing away. Ron shook his head as he tried fighting the Red Rage, but it continued gripping his mind until he remembered that fed of his sorrow and despair. So Ron tried harder and harder to suppress the negative emotions. He shut his eyes and focused on his inner chi, and then the voices of Kim and the others became distant and more far away. Don't let it in. Focus. No bad thoughts. No bad thoughts. Ron thought, trying to calm his mind. You're still trying to resist when you're learning just how weak you truly are. Your weakness is the cause of Japan's destruction. Get out of my head. I'm not weak. What happened in Japan wasn't my fault. Ron yelled in his head. You couldn't protect Yori. You couldn't save her. You couldn't save Master Sensei or the Yamadochi Ninja Clan because you're weak. You wanted true power, and now you've got it. Yet you dare to refuse it? I don't know who the hell you are or what you want, but I'm not letting you control me again. I'm not weak. Ron then shot back. However, whatever was speaking to him. Then why couldn't you save them? Why didn't you not hold back that evil spare power in that one metal suit? You held it back because you're weak. You should have killed them when you had the chance. Then you could have saved Japan. No, it wouldn't have mattered. Ridley would have done it anyway, even if I killed his servant. Ron then shot back in the visible voice in his head. Not all's as it seems, human. You truly don't know who I mean in that suit, do you? What are you implying? Ron demanded in his head. There was silence in Ron's mind for a few seconds. Then that voice had spoke again. Only this time it sounded much more deeper and sinister. It was almost in a demonic way. Foolish human, I know how things couldn't possibly begin to understand. My power knows almost no bounds. Yet even with your mystical monkey powers, you still couldn't figure it out by now? It's no wonder why you've fallen so low. Ron shuddered upon hearing how sinister and evil the voice now sounded. It almost sounded exactly the same way Ron's own voice did when he attempted to kill the mecha suit thug, only to be stopped by Kim. Who are you? What do you want with me? Ron demanded in his mind while trying to hide the fear inside of him. What do I want? To give you what you desire, and that's the ultimate power. Yet you still refuse to accept my power. You summoned me with your power back in the train yards, and as that madman mocked you, and I gave you a little taste of my power. You did quite a number on that scumbag, but yet you still refused to take his life. You held back because Kim Possible asked you to, and you accepted it without even a second thought. You held back because of Kim Possible, those you love. No, I held back because I'm not a murderer. If I killed him, I'd be no better than the Black Shadow. Ron corrected his evil entity. That's where you're wrong, human. You have committed murder before. You did it 2 years ago during the Laudorian invasion when you killed Warhawk and Warmongoa by throwing them into your own ship and destroying it in the process. Remember Global Justice telling you that they discovered the burned, mutilated corpses of the 2 alien warlords in the remains of their ship once it crashed into Earth? That was different. Warhawk and Ramorgan were aliens, not humans. I did not intend to kill them. It was by accident, Ron protested. They were humanoid aliens, so it was close enough. An accident or not, you can't deny the fact that you took their lives with your abilities. So stop denying who you really are. And who am I? Ron demanded. A killer, a slayer of evil. You could have become much more if you embraced in your full potential. Yet you still won't accept some lives needed to be taken for the greater good. After all, you and the woman who love are facing a criminal organization, far more powerful than any villain you faced before. So it's only a matter of time until you accepted it. Am I right? Just who are you? Ron snapped, ignoring everything the strange voice said. You heard of the Yono the Destroyer, haven't you? Well, he was the one with monkey fists unearthed from that ancient buried temple in the Seminole Canyon several years ago. You're one of the Sister Hannah defeated. Well, you haven't wondered what would have happened to the original Destroyer after Monkey Fist was turned into stone? Ron felt his heart almost skip a beat when the Yono Destroyer was mentioned. Yono had been summoned by Monkey Fist several years ago in attempt to locate the Monkey Mystic weapon, which was actually Ron's sister Hannah Stoppable. After Yono was defeated, Monkey Fist was turned into stone, and Yono had vanished into the unknown. Ron remembered Wade examining the halves of the ancient scroll, later find out that Hannah and Yono were related. As for what happened to the original Yono after Monkey Fist took his place, was when he turned into stone. No one knew it, but Ron couldn't exactly understand what his evil identity was in his mind saying. No one knows what became of him. What are you getting at? Ron asked in confusion. With all your knowledge of mystical monkey powers, I'm surprised that you haven't figured that out yet. As you do know, the original Yono vanished after Monkey Fist was turned into stone and putting him in his place as the new Yono. But no one knew what became of the original Yono. I'm sure you already knew who Yono is, the dark side version of the mystical monkey weapon. But you ever wondered where Yono's source of power originated from? Did you ever wonder to know how Yono came to be? I've wondered about it a few times, but what does that even mean? Ron replied. Why does it matter? You really don't know anything, do you? Well, then allow me to shed some light in the subject that Master Sensei never told you, or ever refused to tell you. You see, many centuries ago, the founders of the Yamadochi Ninja School, created by the Jade Idols, imbued with the ability to grant anyone who obtained them with mystical monkey powers like yourself. However, the founders didn't want the power of the mystical monkey to fall into the wrong hands, so they sealed the statues in various temples, in which they would later be found by Monkey Fist, centuries later. You already know the mystical monkey powers can be used for good or evil, depending on who wields them. However, there is a much darker variant of mystical monk energy, similar to the mystical monkey energy, but out there that can grant greater strength, power, superhuman speed only, who possess the mystical monkey powers. However, unlike the positive energy of mystical monkey powers, the source of the energy as known as the Red Rage, its main source originates from an evil demon that was summoned almost 1,000 years ago by an evil cult in the Yamanochi known as Crimson Skull that worshipped the devil itself. The cult leaders who desired the power and influence over Japan and believed that the weak should have served as so strong, and they attempt to seek out into the four jade idols to gain the power of the mystical monkey. But the founders refused to give out the cult locations where the idols. The leaders of Crimson Skull brutally tortured the founders in attempt to make them give in the cult what they wanted. But they couldn't break no matter what they tried. So the Crimson Skull came up with a new plan. If they couldn't gain any powers of the mystical monkey, then they seek true power another way, and that was by summoning the demon to a greater of power than any mystical monkey. Ron already began to guess where this is going, and he had a feeling it wasn't going to end well. The Crimson Skull kidnapped 4 virgin females and sacrificed them at the night of the harvest moon to save himself and summon this demon that would agree to grant their wishes in exchange for their undying loyalty. The cult accepted it, and without second thought, the demon returned and created 2 dark entities that would serve the Crimson Skull with their command. One was a dark energy source known as the Red Rage, a power source that feeds off negativity of energy of all the living things. Emotions such as anger, hatred, fear, lust, sorrow, and greed is the Red Rage's main source of energy. Although anger is provided to be the strongest source of negative energy out of all the 4 negative emotions, and as the name implies, however, the energy of mystical monkey powers are fed to the positive light energy of all living things, such as happiness, love, kindness, and compassion. Now, I'm pretty sure you know by now, although the mystical monkey powers are fed by a positive energy, it can still be used for evil purposes, as if the welder has an evil heart. Even light can be corrupted. The second dark identity the demon had created, evil being known as Yono, and it was placed upon the roof of the ancient temple that Monkey Fist would later unearth centuries later. The Red Rage and Yono stood on their side. The Crimson Skull wreaked havoc upon Yamanochi and began enslaving the other regions of Japan as well. No armies could stand against the power they possessed, and the ancients members of the Yamanochi ninja school were forced into hiding to avoid being exterminated by the Crimson Skull. For many years, the Crimson Skull, now a dominant empire, ruled of Japan with an iron fist, tyranny, greed, and even savagery like never before. Any who had dared to resist the tyrannical laws set in place by the emperor would be exterminated, along with their families. Desperate to try and end the Crimson Skull's region of terror, the founders of Yamanochi gathered as much light energy as they could and placed it inside the womb of a female ninja, who later would give birth to a son that would be known as the Han, being the firstborn of the light itself. The Han? Wait, that's who my sister is? Ron asked, suddenly shocked. It would seem that you're wiser and more intelligent than I thought. Yes, you are correct. This Han happened to be the greater ancestor of your sister Hannah Stoppable. I'm surprised that Master Sensei never knew about this, but I knew more than you could ever known. You see, Master Sensei had many flaws, but that was not fully studying every aspect about this darkness. Now, he was more of a man who valued the light rather than the dark. He didn't really fully grasp the truth, that I know, but I'm not pretty sure how he studied some of the history on this cult, since I know for a fact he knows but the Red Rage's existence. Oh, really? And what happened to this Crimson Blood Skull cult? Ron demanded, sounded greatly offended by this entity mocking Master Sensei. Eager and impatient, as always, I see. Well, since you're greatly intrigued by this little history lesson, I may as well continue my long story. After your sister's great ancestor was born, the founders of the Yamanochi named him Hiroshi, and he would later go on to fight the leaders of the Crimson Skull, and finally their emperor. In fact, the combat with these power cultists, Hiroshi would be given a full army of soldiers, gifted with the mystical monkey powers like himself, to give him a better chance at fighting the Crimson Skull Empire. With great permission of the founders of the ninja school, they allowed Hiroshi to become the new head of the Yamanochi Ninja School, and would later allow him to grant ninjas he saw worth being a true follower with mystical monkey powers. After a long period of time, Master Hiroshi formed a new army over 14,000 ninja warriors gifted with mystical monkey powers. This began working to take back Yamanochi and the rest of Japan from the clutches of the Crimson Skull, and so began the longest war of the history of Yamanochi. This war would last 5 years, and at that time thousands of soldiers from both sides would perish in battle. Other citizens who have longed for their freedom from the tyranny of the Crimson Skull Empire also joined Hiroshi's armies to assist them in the battle. Many of them would fare well, however. Most of the Emperor's soldiers possessed the Red Rage, making them far superior than any normal soldier not bearing the mystical monkey powers. After 5 long years, Hiroshi and his armies managed to take back most of Japan control from the Crimson Empire, but most of his armies had been greatly reduced to only a few hundred soldiers. Thousands had perished in battle, and very few were left, but Hiroshi eventually managed to take down the high-ranking imperial generals when they fought the emperor himself. This was a great fight that would determine the fate and failure and future of Japan, but it would be the one that would rank the most imperial generals, and eventually he fought the emperor himself. This was the fight that would later determine the fate of the future, but once eventually the evil emperor fell at the blade of Hiroshi's sword when they fought, however, the emperor had landed a fatal blow on Hiroshi as well. He would eventually die from his injuries. While the emperor is now dead, Japan had been freed from several long years of training, but Japan had also lost one of their greatest heroes as well. The people of Japan and everyone in Yamanochi mourned for the loss of Hiroshi for many days, but as the fate would have had it, Hiroshi had married a beautiful female ninja named Kasumi a month before fighting the emperor. The two lovers had eventually made love on the night of the harvest moon, causing Kasumi to become pregnant with Hiroshi's child, and this child would later become the next leader of the Yamanochi Ninja School. His child's descendants would also take place across history as well. In order to ensure that this horrible event in history would never be repeated, the founders of Yamanochi Ninja School sealed the dark energy away to another dimension so that no one could ever attempt to use this evil power again. But there was one flaw that they missed. A flaw? Ron asked in confusion. The founders discovered that although no normal person could use the Red Rage any longer, since it was now sealed away into another dimension, along with the demon who created it, those who had possessed the mystical monkey powers could access the Red Rage if they so desire. They found this out after family members of the former Yamanochi ninja named Kiro were murdered by a rival clan of the evil devil, worshipping ninjas. Kiro was also desperate for revenge that he tapped into the Red Rage with his hatred and anger, then brutally slaughtered the entire rival ninja clan. This greatly angered the founders, and as punishment, Kiro was banished from the Yamanochi Ninja School for his actions. What became of Kiro afterwards is unknown, but I know the truth unlike you do. I guided Kiro down the path to unlocking his full potential, and that was by teaching him to do what the Yamanochi would never allow him to do any keen to do, and that was to never sparing his enemies. Kiro no longer protected from the weak from the strong, so he became something vigilant, hiding and operating in the shadows, as he showed absolutely no mercy or evil to doers who were attacked. He longed to protect the weak from the strong. Enslaved or harassed innocent people of Japan, Kiro would strike them down where they stood. He's even going as so far as wipe out the entire criminal gangs or syndicate that dared to hurt the innocent, and this earned his title as the Merciless Slayer. For many people had feared him, but many had so loved him for protecting them from the strong. But as the old saying goes, enough is never enough. Kiro's connection to the Red Rage had manipulated his mind to the point where he believed that there was the only way to stop all crime, was to find a way over to the current government in place. Although Crimson Skull had been defeated and a new government reformed, crime was still quite rampant of all Japan. Kiro longed to get rid of that, but although he knew as well that I.B., the only person with mystical monkey powers, could access the Red Rage, Kiro knew in full that the ninjas of Yamanochi would never allow themselves to be corrupted by some dark power. This also meant Kiro would be on his own, or so he thought. As it turns out, a few ninjas within Yamanochi Ninja School were gifted with mystical monkey powers and secretly began trying to tap into the Red Rage in hopes of trying to use it for some good rather than evil. Due to all the crime and corruption brewing in Japan, they were nothing but short, absolutely foolish. The rogue ninjas were eventually caught and banished from the school as punishment for breaking the founder's greatest law, and that was to never tap into the Red Rage. The ninjas tried explaining that they intended to use its powers for good rather than evil, but the founder said there was such thing. It was impossible given the fact that the Red Rage's power was by pure evil energy itself, to which it could easily be corrupted the second they tap into it. That's the thing about the darkness. Once you tapped into it and taste it for the first time, you'll desire it more and more until you eventually fall to the point of no return. And that's exactly what happened to Kiro when he banished the ninjas. Kiro had recently heard about the ninjas being banished for their actions and tracked them down after gaining their trust. The rogue ninjas joined Kiro and they began forming a new ninja clan called the Nightblades. They began tapping into the Red Rage and trained themselves in its ways of power. Eventually, they became most powerful villain against the clan of all Japan. They exterminated any criminal gang and corrupted high-ranking officials, even corrupted governors, who they only seemed to treat for society, and even eventually in attracting as well as the attention of the Yamanochi Ninja School. But the founders had deemed Kiro and his clan to treat all Japan and sent the same ninja clan after them. But they had no idea how powerful Kiro and his ninjas had become. They easily overpowered and slaughtered the entire ninja clan and set their eyes on the founders. Upon learning the danger that they were now in, the ninjas they became easily overpowered. Kasumi and her son were fleeing hiding themselves as they took the Nightblades. Shortly after Kasumi and her son fled the school, Kiro and his ninjas arrived to see the founders waiting for him. They demanded to show why Kiro and his clan resorted into killing without remorse or boundaries, and he replied telling them that he was doing it for the family he had lost years ago. He explained that the crime and corruption had taken his family, and he wanted to prevent the same fate that befell on his family happening to anyone else. So Kiro resorted into the darkness, achieved these horrifying goals. The founder said that Kiro was doing nothing more than completely evil. He and his clan have exterminated the entire Yamanochi clan, who were once family to him. But Kiro coldly said that there were traitors, holding back and not accepting some of the lives that needed to be taken for the greater good. Seeing as to how Kiro and his ninjas were beyond salvation at this point, the founders gave him two alternatives: surrender and atone for their crimes, or face extermination. Kiro and his ninjas of course chose to fight, but this ended in a disaster. As powerful as the Red Rage made them, the founders were much more powerful and eventually overpowered Kiro and his ninjas, forcing them to surrender. Before the founders could arrest him, however, Kiro resorted into one last trick, and that was using the Red Rage technique as the Rage Eruption. This was the ability that worked for allowing the user to absorb the rage into every or other negative emotion by using the other living thing on the planet, then to detonate within themselves. It would result in the destruction explosion of a very similar of an atomic bomb. But upon realizing this, the founders made an ultimate sacrifice, was to not only save the Yamanochi Ninja School, but for the rest of Japan itself from complete destruction. They used the light energy within themselves and created an energy shield around the whole school, which absorbed the blast from the red rage and eruption. Kiro and his clan were instantly killed along with his founders, thus ending the end of Rage of Terror once and for all. But the spirits of the founders still communicated with Kasumi and informed her that Kiro and his clan were finally dead. But when they also had died in the battle once again, they ordered her to return to Yamanochi Ninja School to slowly rebuild her clan. This is where my story of the Red Rage origin officially ends. The story Master Sensei never told you. Ron took at the last minute to take in everything this unknown identity had just told him. The history of the Red Rage, the corruption and manipulation it spread. It was all so much for him to take in. Ron was still intrigued, but was horrified of now how dark and sinister the Red Rage truly was. And yet, there was still one thing he needed an answer to.